This is the 10th week where we are analyzing the format changes in Champions. Last week we had Indianapolis results, and of course that shook everyone to their core. While Charizard Y did win the event, it did not dominate the top cut like we had been seeing all the weeks before that. A big part of that, of course, was the success of Tyranitar. And so now we had two other major events happening. On the one hand, we had Japan Nat, which is the most important tournament for Japan because this is the tournament to get your World Championship qualifications. They have a very different system from us in the West. So if Japan is going to be playing the best teams to give them the best odds of winning, it's going to be here. Meanwhile, we also had Turin Regional here in Europe, which is both the first Champions Regional here, but also the last regional of the season in this continent. So if any Europeans who aren't traveling to NAIC still needed their Worlds invite, it was going to happen here. So once again, for that reason, expect people to try hard. These two events are crucial. So for Japan Nats, we actually see a return to form. Indianapolis might have given everyone the idea that, oh, the meta is quite open, but Japan was like, nah. If you look at the top 8 right here, we have Azard Floette, Azard Floette, Azard Floette, Azard Floette, Azard Floette, and then 3 outlier teams. And these outlier teams, while they're a bit spicier, they're not completely off the walls either. At least not all of them. We'll get to that. Froslass, King Gambit team here. Of course, with some different partners. We see a Gengar Rain Perish team, but also with a Froslass. More on that later. And then we see a Sand team. Again, more on that later. However, if you look at this, of course, the obvious thing here is, hey, this is just the same team 5 times in top 8. The only change would be some items, some sets, and then this one Incineroar taking a King Gambit slot. But before that, this is the classic Zard plus Fairy team we've seen dominate all of the weeks. And we even had world champion Shohei Kimura actually tweet about this type of team. I believe they played it themselves, but more importantly, referring to it as a new Big Six or like an evolution on Big Six. If you don't know, Big Six is like a really important historical name for a certain type of Pokemon team that was incredibly dominant. And so referring to this team as that does say a lot. And then if we look at EU, we also see 5 Floette in the top 8 cut. So I think it's fair to say Floette is the king/queen of this format. And while I could have told you that on day 1, there were so many doubters and so many people say, oh, but you can counter it with Sneasler Dire Claw. Oh, it won't be that great. Nope. It's the best mon. It is the one mon that has seen incredible dominance across the 3 regions. Of course, Zard was also good in all 3. Floette is just the winner's choice. And if you want to choose to win, you can subscribe right now. This is the way to stay up to date as we're doing these meta analyses every single week, sometimes Monday, sometimes Sunday. Subscribing is how you make sure you stay up to date. Now, one of the teams I wanted to highlight in this top 8 for Japan Nats was this Gengar Rain team with the Froslass. This hit finals, just so you know, but I don't think you should necessarily go and copying this. This Froslass ran Rain Dance. I know you might be thinking, oh, that's weird, but keep in mind that Japan Nats mostly is best of 1 closed team sheet. So I actually saw the game on stream where this Froslass clicked Rain Dance, changing the weather and completely winning the game on the spot. And that's something you can absolutely do when your opponent has no idea what moves you have. This is not something you can do consistently when they know that you have it, but that does give you that edge in Swiss. Now keep in mind, they did hit finals, so it's not like this team is awful in open team sheet. It's just that some of your cheesy little tricks do vanish. Now another interesting one was this Sand team. As you can see right here, this Tyranitar actually doesn't have the Mega Tyranitar stone, but that doesn't really matter. Usually your Tyranitar doesn't need it to be solid. But what does have the stone is the Clefable. Once again, it's possible that this was a closed team sheet extra good tech. You know, people would expect this to not have the stone and this to have a stone. But on the other hand, I actually think Mega Clefable is solid. Like when I saw Mega Clefable's like ability and everything, I thought, oh, this is so cool. If only it didn't take your Mega. This is a really good redirector, but you just don't want to sacrifice your Mega for it. But if you have a team that can play without a Mega, as you can see right here, like all of these mons are Megalas and they're all good in their own right, suddenly you can have like the best redirector in the format without really sacrificing much of anything. Now again, I don't know how much of this power came from closed team sheet, but it is a cool team. Beyond that though, look at the top 8. I mean, Japan basically was like, this is the best team in the format, we've solved it, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. You just play this, you play better than your opponent and see what happens. However, over in Europe, people did do some spicier stuff. First of all, we have Don't Fuck With The Rock. We have Lycanroc actually doing really well. We had 2 Lycanroc in top 8. Now, Rockmons being good in this format is nothing new. We all know Charizard Y is like the best Mega or second best Mega, depending on who you ask. And so Rock moves are found on stuff like Garchomp, sometimes on Sneasler, often on Aerodactyl. But Lycanroc is also a solid Rock user. Like we have Rock Slide, we have Accelerock, we have Close Combat. And interestingly, both of these players played basically the same team. We had a Sneasler Frostlass Kingambit core. We've spoken about it plenty. We also have a Scovillain and a Basculegion. But yeah, the Lycanroc kind of a standout right here. Now, another standout is the return of Delphox. Earlier in the format, I want to say like week 2 or 3, we saw these Floette Delphox teams really picking up. Usually it was like Delphox, Floette, Aerodactyl, Garchomp, I want to say. But here we see a newish version of that. We still see the classic Floette balance of like Floette, Sinistcha, Incin, and Basculegion. And then just adding the Delphox Sneasler on top of that. I really like how this looks. This looks just like a good stuff team. And the main issue with something like Sinistcha, Incin, Floette is that you usually don't really have anything for Charizard. You can rely on Bask, sure, but these Charizard teams often have Kingambit, and if your Bask isn't Scarf, you're not faster than Charizard, and you can't actually one-shot it with Wave Crash if they have some bulk. And so overall, just this core, it feels like the strongest thing you can do in the format. It's just really awkward into Zard and Kingambit. But your Delphox is actually incredible into Zard, and if you can somehow not make it Sucker Punchable, either through Fake Out or Rage Powder, then suddenly the Kingambit just gets destroyed by the Heat Wave. Of course, if you think about it though, this kind of feels just like another way of playing Zard Y. Zard Y can also click the Heat Waves onto the Kingambit and also walls other Zard Ys. But of course, you have other holes in the team. Zard Y also can't set up, so it's not like you can do the thing where you click Nasty Plot once and then just start one-shotting everything, which you can do with the Delphox. It also outspeeds Mega Gengar, so Psyshock on it is actually pretty real, which is something Zard really can't do. Overall, Delphox being back is really cool. I think this Mon is cool. And we saw 2 of them in top 8 and also one of them in top 16, piloted by Victor Medina, one of the best players in Europe. Next, I wanted to highlight the Cook of the Week being played by Jamie Boyd right here. So if you see just the first Mon, you think, oh, it's just a Floette. But then you look further, it's, oh, there's a Ceruledge and a Serperior and a Wordeer. So the only reason Jamie Boyd actually didn't make it to Top Cut was because of disconnect weird bugs. If you've been watching the streams and have been listening to people who've been playing tournaments, you would actually know that there have been quite a lot of like bugs and input lag, weird things where you click one thing and then something else happens. It's like the game just lags out and you don't get to do anything. And so very sad to lose that way because, I mean, Jamie did cook something crazy right here. He also tweeted out that the best lead in Regulation MA is Milotic Wordeer. Now, Dad, I don't know about that, but he did make top 32 with his weird-ass cook, so who am I to judge? Before Utrecht, he actually told me to bring Solgaleo, and then I didn't, and then I did awful, so maybe I should have just listened. He also shared the paste right here, so you can literally copy this team right now and start playing just the wackiest shit of all time. But if you love using off-meta mons who clearly can still perform, here you go. Next, the winner of the win was actually Marco Silva, one of the best players of this era, and he was playing a Gengar Perish. Now, for the rest of the core, there was Floette and Komo, and we've actually seen this core of 3 do well before in the earlier weeks, but not necessarily with these partners. I did feel like Komo was kind of underrated, and I even told some people on Discord about this a few days ago. The fact that this Mon feels like a Mega without being a Mega is just kind of interesting. You have the best Mons that aren't Megas in Kingambit Bask, and while Komo doesn't necessarily get to hang in that tier, it does feel kind of like a raid boss on its own, which is something not many Mons can say of themselves. Now, to recap, last week, this is what the pie chart looked like for Indianapolis. Quite diverse looking. You can definitely see like the 2 best Mons, okay, taking some of it, but it's not overwhelming in any way. Then we look at JP Nats, and it's a whole different pie chart. This is just one type of team, right? This is like Zard plus a Pixie. Let's call it Pixie Zard. And then Frostlass, you know, still being strong, still being consistent, and then there's one weirder Tyranitar Clef team. Then if we look at Turin, once again, we have a lot of Floette, a little bit of Zard Pixie, also a bit of Zard, and then again Frostlass. So the one standout consistent across all of these pie charts is Floette being absolutely dominant, Zard being always good, and Frostlass being always there. Which brings me to the tier list I'm currently proposing, and that is Pixie Zard and Floette balance in S tier. Pixie Zard can basically be like Zard plus a fairy. According to Japan, this would be basically Floette. But weeks prior, we saw Sylveon. Sometimes there's no Pixie at all. Sometimes it's Whimsicott with a fairy feather. Zard teams are just very, very strong, and sometimes the partners change. Meanwhile, Floette balance also has many forms, but it seems to be a mainstay of the format. that. Then we also, right under that, see Froslass, Sneasler, Gambit. I think you can just not ignore this team at all. And then in B tier, we do have the Gengar, Perish, the Sand, and the Rain. Of course, we could make other tiers with like a bunch more teams. These aren't the only teams. These are just the ones that we see quite consistently throughout higher placements in tournaments. You could argue that because Gengar won Turin and got second place at JP Nats, maybe it can hang in the A tier together with Froslass. It's really just not putting up the same amount of numbers. There's like usually one and they might be doing well, but it's not overtaking in numbers, and so it's hard to really call it like the same as the Froslass team, which we see just a little bit more. But I can totally understand the argument if you want to put that in A. I think you can't, however, argue with this S tier. It's Floette and Zard's world, and we are just living in it. And honestly, if you ask me, I know some people have been talking about Regulation MB and now, oh, that brings Metagross and Salamence, that will change everything. But like, will it? I understand these two mons are incredible, don't get me wrong, but Zard nukes Metagross, right? And Floette nukes Salamence? But then again, Metagross nukes Floette, and Salamence lives Zard. So do we just get this new circular meta? I'm not really sure what's gonna happen there. Maybe we just see other combinations. I don't know, we'll have to wait and see which mons are actually being added in Reg MB. That is all for today. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you soon. Ciao.